Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. Today is going to be a little bit different because it's going to be in English, and that's because it's a milestone for us because we got our first English guest in the studio, and we decided to kick off with no one other than David Allen. And for those of you who don't know who David Allen is, he's the author of a best-selling book called Getting Things Done, which had over 3 million copies sold worldwide. Getting Things Done is a time management life framework that helps you externalize all the things, all the ideas, all the desired outcomes that you want to manifest into an external system to help you progress on those items and make sure that you actually do them. It's also sold as the art of stress-free productivity, which, sort of spoke to Wiggen and me. This podcast was brought to you by our sponsor, NeutroFit. The best place in Europe if you're looking for great supplements for your brain and body. Go check them out at www.neutrofit.nl.
This podcast is sponsored by NeutroFit, official distributor of Onnit supplements in the Benelux and powerful supplier of bulletproof and natural stacks. Your online place to buy supplements and training gear that will help you achieve total human optimization. Try with no risk with our NeutroFit money back guarantee, shipping all across Europe within 24 hours. Find us at www.neutrofit.com.
All right, boys and girls. This is going to be our first podcast in English. Have you been practicing, Wickert?
Been practicing all week.
Well, the regular fans probably know why we're going English right now. Don't worry, this is not going to be permanent, but the guest we have today only speaks English, although we heard him talk a little Dutch, and that was quite all right, but it's probably better if we do it in English. And today is a milestone for us. If this were a video game, we would be breaking high scores and achievements all around today because we got quite a lot of fans the last couple of years, and we got complimented for the fact that we don't talk a lot, but we do. And what a lot of people don't realize is that the fact that we can do so much is strongly related to the fact that we use a system. And there are a lot of systems out there for productivity, but the one I personally love the most is Getting Things Done. And as it happens, today we have David Allen in the studio, which is the author of the book Getting Things Done. And, Mr. Allen, welcome to the studio.
Michelle, delighted to be here. Yeah, I'm here.
That's the right pronunciation.
Yeah. We were amazed that we discovered that you lived in Amsterdam.
Yeah. I love the city. We're still on the honeymoon. We're almost 2 years now, and not tired of it at all. It's a good call.
Yeah, we talked about it a little, but what made you decide to come to Amsterdam?
We'd fallen in love with the city. We'd fallen in love with the Dutch. We don't have kids, and my wife had never lived outside the States, and we got to the point where my small company in California was pretty much self-organizing, and we were pretty virtual anyway. So at some point, somebody offered us a really good price for our house we'd been in for 25 years in Southern California, and we said, that's a sign. And so
Nice.
We unhooked, basically sold and gave away pretty much everything, lightened our footprint. And there's also a good business reason. We're starting to franchise our Getting Things Done, or GTD training program around the world. So we're setting up franchisees and, starting to get a little bit of traction in UK, Scandinavia, and Europe. So, and, come on, Schiphol and Amsterdam are in the middle of everything. So it's fabulous for a lot of reasons. And, come on, what an eye candy city it is just to wander around. And we love it.
Why didn't you choose for London?
Cost.
Cost.
Yeah, it's more expensive.
More expensive. And, London is like the New York, whereas Amsterdam is like San Francisco. Amsterdam is exactly the same size as San Francisco,
Yeah.
and we love San Francisco,
Yeah.
but even more village-like and informal than San Francisco is. Amsterdam is just such an incredibly human city. Everybody's out on their bikes. It's so dog-friendly.
Yeah.
You know,
you don't have to learn a new language because everybody talks English.
Yeah.
No
That's very true.
kidding. Yeah, I mean, and that makes it a little difficult to learn Dutch. And I know, ik begin een beetje met het Nederlands te leren.
Nice, man.
You know, but that, that's about it, guys.
Yeah.
So
So you said you fell in love with the Dutch people. Having been all over the world, what sets us Dutchies apart from the rest?
Well, interestingly, even before I read Russell Shorto's History of Amsterdam, which, by the way, is an incredible intellectual, cultural, political, social history. If anybody hasn't read it yet, I've turned Dutch people onto that book and blew them away because they had no idea how much of actually the DNA of the U.S. actually started in Amsterdam.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that whole history of the Enlightenment starting here, because this was the first place that the individual took precedence over monarchy and church, because there was no monarchy and church, because there was no land, and you can't build a dike by yourself. So the whole history of Amsterdam for the last 500 or 600 years, I'd sort of fallen in love with that anyway. My major in college was American intellectual history of thought.
Cool.
And I still didn't have any idea how much of the DNA of the thought process that turned out to be American actually started in the Netherlands and in Amsterdam specifically.
Yeah.
And so that was intriguing to begin with, and it just such rich culture, and it has the same, I hitchhiked from Istanbul to Karachi, in 1967, all the way across there. And the Dutch, even then, the Dutch were out, doing sort of world traveling and hitchhiking as much as anybody out there. You guys, as I say, you all hitchhiked around the world by the time you're 25. There's just such a global point of view and consciousness here. So, if you want to get out of U.S. centricity, and as you know, probably U.S. is so U.S. centric for good reasons, but we like the idea of being global citizens. And GTD, my professional work and my career in this methodology is a global methodology. So, kind of putting my money where my mouth is. Let me be global citizens now and make myself available. And it's Schiphol Airport's a fabulous place to get any place from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that kind of got me thinking, because you said getting things done, the phenomenon is getting traction internationally now. But the way I see it, it already had a lot of traction, because one of the reasons Wiggett and me got together to do business was the fact that we both loved getting things done and were organized in a way that not everybody else was. So as Dutch people, we already knew about getting things done. And we always got, or at least I always had the idea that it had a huge following internationally, not only in America. But was I mistaken?
Yeah, well, here it's all relative. The brand itself, GTD, was a brand that sort of ran out from under us. We never attempted to create a brand around it. It was just our shorthand for getting things done after the book was published in 2001. And then the tech world kind of picked it up and started to spread it around. And when the first edition of the book went into paperback in 2003, that was about the time the blog world started. And a lot of the top bloggers happened to be GTDers that had run across my stuff. And so they started to publicize it. And so it was the first sort of non-tech meme that just spread through the tech world. Mm-hmm. So it got a lot of global traction, especially through the tech world out there. But still, we're still a small company. GTD, this methodology is for anyone, but not for everyone.
Yeah.
It's...
Yeah, I noticed that.
Really?
Understatement.
But let's get into that a little, because not everybody knows what GTD, or getting things done, is. Wiggett and I, we use it as a workflow system, but perhaps you could explain to our listeners what getting things done is, in essence.
Yeah. Basically, I uncovered, discovered, and made explicit and conscious the behaviors we all do when things really work. We've all had better days than others. So what's the difference? Most people don't know the difference. But what getting things done has done, and what I've done, was just look at what are the behaviors that we actually do that produce more of a sense of control, more of a sense of focus, more of a sense of clarity, more of a sense of freedom inside your head, and just discover those for myself personally. And then I basically codified those behaviors and that methodology. It's not something we're born doing. And it doesn't happen automatically. You actually have to exert some cognitive horsepower on it, but it's not hard. They're behaviors that we all do. Write stuff down, decide a next action, organize it somewhere, look at a list and make a judgment call about what to do. Come on, duh. This is not really rocket science unless you're building rockets. But
that's true.
Truly, I did a seminar training program years ago for JPL, Jet Propulsion Labs in Pasadena. And I generally say, yeah, this ain't rocket science. And they go, yes, it is.
Well, actually, yeah.
Because their outcomes are like Circle Mars, but Circle Mars still has a next action like Call Fred. So, these are universal practices in a way, but very few people are doing them consistently. And when you do them consistently and completely, it really can be transformative in terms of your own experience, in terms of how you thread through the world these days that everybody's having to deal with, in terms of feeling overwhelmed, shifting priorities, so much data, coming at you, the stress of opportunity. I mean, there's a lot of stuff people are dealing with out there, and they haven't really learned what are those best practices and installed them essentially in a systematic way.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And the way the reason why getting things done resonated so well with me was the fact that it made a couple of these behaviors explicit, but it also taught me that why it was necessary to do these things, because we are sort of running on this old hardware, right? We're trying to manifest ourselves in a modern reality with all kinds of information, all kinds of desired outcomes you want to keep in your head. But if you don't trust that into a system, you're going to fail horribly. And the book came into my life at right about the right time, where I was being swamped by all these things I was trying to keep into my head. I was trying to get organized just a little. But I think the main point was, as you just pointed out, was I wasn't being consistent. It wasn't an overlapping system that caught all the things.
Yeah. Well, your head's a crappy office. And the cognitive scientists have really now validated all that. And in the new edition, I put a chapter in there about how much stuff has shown up, actually in the last 15 years. It basically have validated the fact that your head's for having ideas, but it's not designed to hold them. Your head's designed to manage probably a max of about 4 things that you can't finish when you think of them. They used to think it was 7, but now new research is basically 4. Maybe that's after WhatsApp, who knows?
Yeah.
But your brain's not designed to do that. Your brain is designed to do very brilliant stuff, like it recognizes patterns in the moment based upon long-term history. That's why I walked in here and you walk in here and go, oh, microphones, people, lights. Okay, I know what this is. That's very brilliant. The computers can't even come close to that yet in terms of what your brain's doing, but you forgot where you left your damn keys. So the brain is like awful. And as soon as you add more than about 4 things inside your head, you will lose perspective. You're going to be bouncing around like a bad pinball in a bad pinball machine.
Yeah.
And just driven off latest and loudest. And there's just no other... you can't deny that once you see all the data and once you see how it works. So,
and that sounds very stressful. And that was actually a tagline that got me, was the promise of the art of stress-free productivity. Because what exactly is it in this method that helps you sort of manage your stress better?
Well, a lot of the stress comes from just breaking agreements with yourself. You tell yourself you should buy cat food and you're not buying cat food. You just undermined your own self-esteem. You tell yourself to get in shape, and you don't do that. Come on, all of this stuff, and most people are wandering around like, making all the would, could, should, need to, ought to, I need to, and I gotta, and whatever's, and they don't realize that those are all agreements you're making with yourself. And one thing that I learned years and years ago when I was involved in a lot of the more, intensive self-development, personal growth kind of training, was a lot of that has to do with agreements. If you break an agreement, you disintegrate trust in a relationship. That is an automatic price that you pay. I mean, there are people I love dearly, but what I wouldn't trust further than I could spit to show up when they tell me they're going to show up. Right, so I don't trust them to be able to do that. But that's also true internally. If I tell myself I would, could, should, ought to, or need to, and I don't, or I'm not appropriately engaged with that commitment, then it starts to eat at me. And it's, if it were one thing, that'd be bad enough, but it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of things that people just are not that conscious of what they've done. So a lot of the GTD process was getting people to just to acknowledge all those things that they have their attention on.
Yeah.
Things that are not on cruise control, you want to have different or in some way, shape, or form, and just start to manage that inventory. And that starts to relieve a whole lot of the stress to begin with.
Yeah. So I was wondering about, before we get into the system, you said, well, I kind of uncovered this sort of universal a truth almost. How did that discovery happen? Because when I did a little research, aka I Googled David Allen Wiki, and I saw that you had a lot of jobs. There's a short list: magician, very interesting; waiter, karate teacher, landscaper, vitamin distributor, glass blowing lathe operator, travel agent, gas station manager, U-Haul dealer, moped salesman, restaurant cook, personal growth trainer, manager of a lawn service company, and manager of a travel agency.
Yeah.
That is quite diverse.
Yeah, well, I didn't know what I wanted to do when I grew up, and I got bored easy.
Did you get fired a lot?
No, I left. No, I left. I left. But come on, guys. I was, I thought I was going to be a historian. I've been after sort of God, truth, and the universe and enlightenment and so forth, and started out studying philosophy. And then I got bored with the philosophers themselves because they all wound up proving their original hypothesis using their original hypothesis. And I thought, well, that's kind of a circle jerk. So
Exactly.
I was a little bored with that. But what was more interesting was the philosophers themselves. That's how I got into studying why did that philosopher have that paradigm or thought process, and start with that. And why was that different than Heidegger? And why was that different than Kant? And why was that different? And then I got turned on to the idea of cultures had their own sort of belief systems. I don't even think we used the word paradigm back then, but that's what I started to get enthralled by. I was always enthralled by how the invisible affects the visible. There's a whole lot of stuff you can't see that I intuited probably drives a whole lot of what you do see. Even just your thought process. You can't see your thoughts, but they sure affect, your energy and your emotions and all that stuff. So there's a lot of stuff out there, and I got fascinated by that. I'm the laziest guy in the world, so I thought if I could get a hold of whatever their inner workings of the universe, and then learn how to pull those strings, that'd be a way cool thing to do. So that's been a fascination of mine, actually, most of my life. But of course, they aren't paying people to do that stuff. So I was in graduate school, decided that wasn't giving me the enlightenment that I was studying, and so I dropped out and then started to do a whole lot of personal exploration, martial arts, spiritual practices, things like that, studying the inner world. And so the outer material world, frankly, was not that interesting to me, but again, I had to pay the rent. Then I had a whole bunch of friends in my network who actually did have some aspirations and stuff they were trying to do in the world here, entrepreneurs, and they were starting their own businesses. And so I was a good number two guy. So I wound up, helping a lot of them, start their businesses, run their businesses. Of course, being as lazy as I am, I'd walk in and just see what they were doing and say, well, guy, you could probably do this a lot easier. Yeah. Now they call that process improvement, right? Sexy term. But basically, I just said, let's fix it. We'd fix it, and then it'd get on to cruise control, and then I'd get bored. Then I'd leave. And so that's where a lot of that kind of came from. And then at a certain point, I realized they actually pay people to do that, and they call them something, so consultant. Couldn't spell it. Now I R1. Hung out my shingle, 1981, Allen Associates. Started my own little consulting practice. But then, again, because I like to do things easy, I said, I don't want to have to make it up every time I show up with some new person or situation. If it's not obvious to me what I could do to help them improve, it'd be nice to have some models or some frameworks that I could apply, that I could trust would probably bring improvement to what they were doing. So there were two factors and vectors that really affected, sort of some of the initial DNA, essential formation of the getting things done methodology was, first of all, my interest in finding a model that kind of worked for everybody. But secondly, and maybe even more importantly, I had tasted what I now refer to as the strategic value of clear space. In meditative practice and martial arts practices, and the whole idea of mind like water. There's a very real practical aspect to that. If 4 people jump you in a dark alley, you don't want to have 2,000 unprocessed emails in your backlog, right? You need to be nice and clear. So, and there are very specific techniques about how to get clear. I mean, you guys, if you're trained, you know, if you get hit somewhere, it hurts a lot. Just focus on your breathing, because that's the fastest way to become mindful and focus on the present, because your breathing it will bring you present. So that the whole idea of clear space. But then, so I tasted clear space, and that was a very cool thing to do. And then my world got more complex, and I discovered how that screwed up clear space. So then I said, well, let me start to try some of these techniques. And I had some mentors and people that taught me various pieces of this. And I tried them out, and I went, oh, man, that really works. I had a guy had me sit down and just empty everything out of my head that was on my mind. I said, I thought I had my act together, but that was game changing just for me. It turned around and started to do that stuff with all the people I was working with, and invariably created the same result: greater sense of traction, more sense of control, more of a sense of meaningful focus in terms of what they were doing. So that was, kind of the backdrop of all of this, where I took all that stuff and started to pull it together, and then I found that people seemed to like it, and it was a good job to helping people improve their conditions using this stuff.
Yeah. What I loved about GTD is that it was nice and structured. It was lean in the sense that it wasn't overly complex. Although I have to admit, the first time I read the book, it went flying through the room because it encountered inner resistance. Because I was like, do I have to do all this? You got to be kidding me! There's got to be an easier way. But you might have heard this before. But when I settled down a little, I was like, yeah, but you need something to cover the gaps you have in your own mental defenses, and this seems to do that perfectly. So what it does, it puts the whole process in these simple steps. Could you tell a little bit more about the steps?
Sure, but Michelle, let me first say, I understand, and over the years I've noticed that a lot of people had that same reaction to the book, because I threw it all in there. Everything is in there. I took 25 years of my career and work, and I put it all in there because I didn't want to shortsheet anybody. I wanted to give them the whole manual. Yeah. And I never had time to give everybody all the implications and applications of this stuff, so I threw it all in there.
Well, that was exactly the thing. It was so all-encompassing that was like, this is a framework for my entire life. This doesn't only apply to my job. I have to put everything in here. Even the books I have to return to friends and stuff like that. That's going to be so much work. I don't want to do all this.
Yeah.
In the end, it wasn't that much work at all. But still,
it seems
the mind
like
reared at it.
Oh, sure. It seems that way. And frankly, even one or two things in your life that you're not appropriately engaged with yet, like using this methodology, will make your whole life feel overwhelming. So again, inside your head, that's where your life was. And so even all that stuff seems like it's so much bigger than it actually is. Once you get it all out, it's a lot of people go, hey, well, that's not so bad.
I like the fact you talk about, getting the clear space in your mind, because I think your method has added much value to my life in terms of giving structure. You just named it, giving me peace of mind, but also giving me free time. But most importantly, actually being able to enjoy the free time because you have a free mind, Because a lot of people, they plan out free time, like, I don't have to work, but they're still busy with work because their mind is all cluttered up with all kinds of stuff. And being able to just have free time and not think about everything, that's a game changer.
Yeah.
Well, everybody talks about time management. You can't manage time, guys. I mean, you don't mismanage 5 minutes and come up with 4.5 or 6.
Exactly. You can't put 25 hours in a day.
Time just is. What you really need is space. So to your point, when you talk about just the clarity and the space and the freedom inside, that was my driver for this too. Mm-hmm. I'm not a naturally organized guy. You can ask my wife. No, really. But the reason I discovered this and started to apply it was because I love spontaneity, trusting my intuitive judgments, plan as little as I can get by with. But I found I couldn't afford to do that unless I had this structured. If I was trying to live in a complex life, I had to have essentially an equally complex system in order to be able to simplify it. So it's a cybernetic principle. So
exactly. It feels like augmenting your brain a little with something external.
Exactly.
It takes over certain functions.
Well, it's building the external brain, which is now the cognitive scientists now are clarifying that you need that. And if you keep a calendar, you're already doing it, right? You're already saying my head can't do that.
Yeah.
Right. And so the whole idea of being able to externalize all of it. So yes, it's augmenting, but augment is, exponentially. It's like, well, you should try to memorize everything, keep your brain active. I say, well, right, I understand you should probably walk or run everywhere, but don't you like the car and the train?
It's faster.
It's a whole lot faster. You can get a lot more done with a lot less effort. So leveraging that augmentation, but basically being able to leverage your intuitive judgment, that's really where all this is. I don't know how long I'll be preaching this, guys, but you'd think people would get this soon enough that your head just really is not the place for it. But I think it gives people a false sense of control to keep everything in your head.
Yeah. I think it's overestimation as well.
Oh, sure.
And I think it's hard to get a new habit into it because I think a new habit gets integrated in your brain after 66 days, I think, continuous practice.
Yeah, 45 days.
So you really have to put in the effort to make it work.
Yeah, I'll give you 2 years.
Yeah.
Come on, it takes 2 years to learn the banjo, 2 years to learn Italian, 2 years to learn to cook. I don't know how long it takes to learn to be a parent. You know, but this thing, and this is a lifelong lifestyle art.
Yeah.
How do you manage the flow of life's work and in the complexity in the worlds we're living in? So trying to assume that you can do this overnight, you know, it's like trying to assume that you could speak Dutch overnight.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know,
I think you can teach someone the basics, but the internalizing is in the doing
Sure.
daily. You don't think about brushing your teeth.
Right.
And that should be the same for getting things done, but I can probably teach you how to brush your teeth in a day.
well, there's the 5 eyes. First of all, you have the information about it. That may give you the inspiration that you could do it and it'd be cool. But then you have the installation of it, which is I got to start to set it up and actually start to do some stuff, put stuff in it. Then you have the implementation of it where you're actually using some of these basic blocking and tackling techniques, you know, the 2-minute rule, keeping a list, deciding some next actions, keeping most of the stuff out of your head. And then there's the integration part where you can't remember when you didn't do this.
Yeah.
But that sequence and that is how you really learn and integrate anything, you know, until it becomes habitual, to your point. The cool thing about it is this stuff improves situations immediately. So you don't have to wait 2 years to get some value out of it. If you just write down a few more things than you're normally doing, you'll sleep better.
So for the people that have been practicing getting things done, do you support people finding their own way in it? Or do you think the method you describe as in your book, that's the one how you should do it? Because for me, the 2-minute rule is a 5-minute rule. It works better for me.
Sure.
Why is it 2 minutes, by the way?
Well, 2 minutes is pretty much the line. Basically, if you're not familiar with it, folks listening to this, the 2-minute rule simply says once you decide the very next action on something, if you're going to do it, ever do it at all, and it takes less than 2 minutes, it would take you longer to organize it than to do it. So that's just where you draw the line on that.
Yeah.
And hey, I'll be flying to, I don't know, Chicago sometime next week, and you know, with the 8 or 9 hours on the plane, I've got, you know, I'll have the 10-minute rule. You know,
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it doesn't say that's a hard and fast thing. Nothing is really hard and fast in there except the truth of the principles, and then how you apply that. I mean, your head is a crappy place to keep stuff. How you get it out of your head and into what places you put it, that's up to you. You know, but don't kid yourself. If you file a commitment with yourself in your head, you're going to give it, you know, more attention than it deserves, or not as much attention as it deserves. Yeah. You can't disprove that. So that's, some of these principles are inviolate. Also, if you haven't decided the very next action step on something that you're committed to do, you're not appropriately engaged with it yet, and it'll still bug you. Yeah. So there, you know, what I have uncovered are the algorithm that you actually have to apply if you want to get that stuff off your head. Yeah.
That's an interesting facet of getting things done as well. If you look at other protocols and frameworks, they usually talk about goals and getting goals. But the thing that getting things done talks about is grab what gets your attention, which is a different thing. Because if I ask someone to write a list with their goals or write something that's bugging you and on your mind right now, I get 2 different lists.
It may be. Sometimes a person's goals are what's on their mind. See, GTD starts with where you are, not with where you should be. Where you are could be at any of these horizons. The truth is, you're right, most people, what's most top of mind to them is not fulfill their destiny as a human spirit on the planet. It's cat food and babysitter. and my printer just fucking broke. And you know, that's what's got people's attention. And the problem is, if you try to then do the aspirational vision stuff and you can't control your day, you're just adding insult to injury for that. And so what happens, interestingly, is when you actually handle the mundane details of your life, it opens up space that it's almost like the bubble, inspiration at the higher horizons just bubbles up naturally.
Yeah, but that's where progress lives, right? At the action level. And I think that's a very important lesson that GTD taught me as well, is if I start looking at my horizons and I start putting, you know, markers on those horizons, I want to go there, and I start peeling it off, all of a sudden it becomes very clear that these first actions are actually unlocking things that will get me there.
Exactly.
And that was a big eye-opener for me. That got me to do stuff, mundane stuff, that I wasn't feeling like doing because it wasn't as glorious as the higher horizons that I was thinking about.
Yeah. I wrote an essay once called The Magic of the Mundane about that very point. that there's all the mundane things you do are essentially tied and connected to who you are as a human spirit and why you're on the planet and actually what you're doing. So just unpacking all of that is a fascinating thing, and you don't have to go very far. You know, you just take a look at current reality in terms of who you are, just unpeel it down at all those subtler levels.
Yeah, I was looking at my goals and, you know, for the next 5 years or 10 years, and I'm breaking it down GTD wise. And it reminded me that it kind of unlocks the law of attraction as well, if you do it the right way. I mean, just start building and start doing it, and things get bigger and things go by themselves at one point.
You are familiar with the law of attraction?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what you mean by, but I know that if you want to, if what you mean is if you start moving towards something, you start to attract stuff to you based upon that.
You start recognizing options that weren't there before.
Sure.
Probably were, but you're just looking at
Oh, come on. You know, one of the first things you learn when you're sparring in karate is don't stop moving.
Yeah.
Right. Because even if you're going 180 degrees the wrong direction, it takes less energy to switch 180 degrees than to get going from a standstill. So as you start to engage, then you start to the universe starts to mobilize itself around your intentions, for sure.
And we can make it as spiritual as you want, but you know, the basics are just have to know what you have to do, and then you just have to fucking do it.
Yes.
And then things start rolling. You know, it's not that easy. It's not that hard. I mean,
you know, come on, guys. The zeros and ones of productivity. I mean, you've got a theme of productivity here. Productivity simply means, you know, producing some desired result or experience. So if you're going to a party to boogie and you don't boogie, that's an unproductive party. Yeah. But see, productivity has this baggage around it of business and busyness, as opposed to, hey, I'm going to go relax, and if you don't relax, that's unproductive. Yeah. So, you know, productivity simply says, you know, produce something. So in a way, the zeros and ones of this and the GTD methodology is outcome and action. What's the final outcome? What's the ideal scene? What's my vision of what I'm trying to produce or experience? And what's the very next action? In other words, how do I allocate resources or my attention in order to be able to move the needle toward closure on that? Yeah. That's it. I mean, in a way, that's how every meeting should start. What are we trying to accomplish by what time? Shouldn't end discussions without going, so what did we just decide right now, guys? Is this yours or mine in terms of that? So this behavior, you know, people call it GTD. This is just good business, the business of life stuff. But it's those two things, and those actually you require different parts of your brain. It requires a certain part of your brain to see the vision and the outcome, but it requires another part of your brain to decide the next action on it. That's why it can be a bit challenging to do this, because you actually have to exercise a cognitive muscles that's not exactly down the same track. So you actually have to, you know, some people are very good at outcome thinking and some people are very good at detail action thinking, but to tie those together, that's part of the elegance of maturity with GTD, is where you start to integrate both of those things. And you've been discussing it here all along, but I just thought I'd make that more explicit.
Yeah.
Well, actually, that gets more easy the way you do it. I think that describing it as a muscle is an excellent way to go about it. It's something that you can actually train and develop over time.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's very true. But to get a little bit more under the hood of getting things done, because there are these steps everybody can go through that actually help a lot in making this happen. How do you go about this?
Well, there's 5 steps we recognized about how you get anything more under control and more appropriately focused. And those 5 steps are to capture, clarify, organize, reflect, and engage. Capture just simply says what's got your attention, what's not on cruise control about a situation or anything. And then clarify means, okay, once you determine what's got your attention, what exactly are you going to do about that, if anything? And then organize the results of that thinking in some trusted place, so that then you reflect on and sort of review what the whole gestalt of it is, so that then when you decide to take a nap or have a beer or write your business plan, that is exactly a trusted choice about what to do, and you know you're not missing anything. So it's really a set of practices that move you from hope to trust in terms of what you're doing. And that's how you get your kitchen under control. You know, have you ever had your kitchen look like somebody attacked it when you got home and you got somebody coming over, you got friends coming over for dinner in an hour? You know, what do you do aside from, you know, just drink or go to restaurants? You know, what do you do if you're going to handle the situation? First thing you do is recognize what in the kitchen is not where it should be, the way it should be. That's the capture step. right? What's not on cruise control in the kitchen? Then what do? You clarify that's bad food. Oh, that's still good food. Oh, that's the spices. Oh, that's a dirty dish. That's a clean dish. So now you're clarifying what those things mean to you. Then what do? Well, you put clean dishes where they go. You put dirty dishes in the dishwasher. You organize, in other words, based upon what you decided these things are and what they mean. Then you put them where those things go, right? Then you step back and say, well, gee, okay, I see the kitchen's, here's where it is. Where's the recipe? What time is it? Are they coming over? And you melt butter. So those are the 5 steps. And that'll get your kitchen under control. It'll also get your consciousness under control. Yeah. Literally the same thing. It's just you've got a much wider field of territory when you're trying to get your consciousness under control, but it's the same thing. If I sat down with either one of you right now, I'd say, okay, guys, what's on your mind? What's not on cruise control right now? So we don't have to go very far. Oh, I need cat food. Oh, I need to rewrite this. Oh, I got to finish this blog or this post or this podcast. Whatever those things are, we capture all those things that have your attention. And by the way, for most people, the most mid to senior level professional folks anyway, that we coach and work with one-on-one, that takes 1 to 6 hours just to identify what's on their mind, not to do anything with it. Yeah, we just write it down. Cat food, get a life, hire an assistant.
You mean the entire dump of what the cloud that's all over
entire core dump, yeah. And then once you've done that, then you need to go to the clarify step, which is, okay, is this an actionable item? What you wrote down, yes or no? And if it is, okay, what's the very next action you need to take? And if one action won't finish it, what's the project you've got here? And that thinking process and clarifying, well, what's trash and what's reference material in the other categories, and going through all of that really takes another 8 to 12 hours just to have people, make these executive decisions that they've just been avoiding about all that stuff. So that's real, the blocking and tackling. And then you add to that, okay, once you decide what the action step is on something and what the project is, if you can't finish them in that very minute, you better keep track of them in a trusted place instead of your head. And that's where we help people customize their own systems. Mostly just lists that they need to keep track of, about that. And those are the sort of core elements of how you start to get this, your life and your consciousness under control to begin with. And then, of course, building this in so that that's a consistent thing and not just something you do as a random event, but that your life stays captured, clarified, organized, and reviewed on a regular basis. Yeah, that's the habit building. That takes a while to make that integrated.
I remember when I started getting things done, which was about 2003, I guess. One of the big issues was making lists, making projects, and you got it all mapped out, and then procrastination came in.
Yeah.
Does that sound familiar?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, you're the only person who's ever procrastinated.
I know I'm different.
I don't procrastinate, do you?
But it's just really like you see all the lists and you're going to pick out a nice task, which is not really the way to do it. So I was already smuggling a little bit in the method. Yeah. What to do about it?
Well, there are a lot of reasons. I mean, everybody's been studying procrastination for years and why that's true. One of the things that I've discovered when people actually start to implement getting things done, it unsticks a lot of that. The primary reason, in my experience, people procrastinate is that the greatest human fear is the fear of feeling out of control or being out of control. That's people are killing themselves and each other as I speak here just to achieve or maintain a sense of psychological control. It's that powerful a driver. I mean, just for us normal people and normal behavior, the way that translates is you're not going to feel comfortable engaging with something immediately that you don't feel like you can control immediately. And that's mentally, physically, or emotionally. So, mental control, I'm not sure if this is going to be perfect. Oh my God, there's so many things I have to think about before I can start writing this blog or writing this forward to the book or doing this thing. And so if you're not sure exactly how to get started, there's a part of you that will feel like that's a void and I don't want to step into the void, especially if you have perfectionism sitting inside of you and you've been trained in school that it better be good before you write it. You'll avoid stuff like the plague. And so that's mental. Physical, and it would be, it's going to feel yucky and I'm going to feel physically out of control. For a lot of people, that's exercise. God, if I sweat, I'll die.
Yeah.
So
You won't, by the way.
they'll avoid sort of just hopping into something, or clean your garage, or clean your, something, some yucky thing. The images of dirt and grease and dead things and living things, and they're just, that's awful. So you'll feel out of control that way. And emotional control, loss of emotional control would be the thing you'll probably avoid more than anything. Is telling somebody you care a lot about something, you got to tell them, and you're afraid of how you're going to feel about how they're going to feel when you tell them what you got to tell them, and you'll avoid that longer than anything.
Yeah.
So if that's true, then to lower the barrier to entry for any of that, one of the best things to do is to really just focus on what's the very, very next physical action. Mm-hmm. Just because it's the people who procrastinate the most, in my experience, are the most creative, sensitive, intelligent people, because they're people that can look at something, think about it in a half a second, generate 432 phantoms of negative pictures of the potential consequences if it's not done perfectly, and they freak themselves out right to begin with.
Yeah.
The people who don't procrastinate are the people you give stuff to do, and they go okay, and they just they just start thudding through it because they're so insensitive, they're not aware of all the stuff that could screw up. But all of you listening to this podcast, I'm sure, put yourself in the creative, sensitive category, and then you're the most hung up for that reason. So anything you can do to lower the barrier to entry, exercise, just put on your gear. Don't make it any harder than just put on your gear. Do one push-up, see what happens. Then the law of attraction will take over.
Are you saying don't overthink it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Paralysis by analysis.
Indeed. Yeah, that's one of the biggest things that will cause that. And ultimately, a lot of that has to do with self-confidence. How much do I trust I can do this really well? If you've written 433 blogs, sit, button chair, boot computer, start hitting keys. You're okay. Yeah. If you've never done one before, it's like, oh my God, I don't know how to do this. So the self-confidence piece also helps, and then that's also something that GTD and applying this methodology makes you feel a lot more confident that you can handle things really well, because you can start to build that experience in.
I think that's very true. And I also think that if people start getting organized and they start preparing certain situations, as GTD kind of, tells you to do, for example, a meeting, then I think they have a sort of, they have something to hold on to while they're doing the thing that they're sort of afraid to do. The one that resonates a lot is the one where people have this fear of negative evaluation. My first action is something where I have to tell somebody a thing they probably won't like, or at least I think they won't like it, and I'm very scared of the way they're going to react to me. Right. And I think if your confidence is higher, that you find it way easier to do these things. Sure. But I find that if I have a little agenda for one of those meetings, I feel way more confident.
Sure. Yeah, well, it's getting your ducks in a row, as we say, and that makes a huge difference, for sure.
Why are we so afraid of the opinions of others?
Oh, I don't know. Well, the people who studied this years ago, when I was doing a good bit of study on self-talk and affirmations and visualization and all that kind of stuff, I read the statistic that the average person's self-talk is 85 to 90% negative. You can't do this. I'm not good at this. I'm just going to hurt, whatever. And that matches something else, and it matched a statistic that if you grew up in a healthy U.S. home anyway, guess how much of your feedback was negative and critical? Yeah. 85%. So there seemed to be quite a matchup between, hey, don't do this, you're going to hurt yourself, And so the negative self-talk is so built into our culture.
We're conditioned.
Yeah, very, very much conditioned. If I beat myself up first, nobody can beat me up afterwards. And so that the sense of I can't do that. Really is to try to stay in your comfort zone and not feel like you screw up. That you go out and make a mistake. So the fear of making mistakes is again that's tied to the perfectionism, which is probably the greatest source of procrastination.
Yeah, and by slicing and dicing down your desired outcomes to the first next step, that probably takes away a little of that resistance, because everybody can put on their walking shoes.
Sure.
Anybody can put on their tracksuit to start running.
Hey, if you decide the next action on anything, I don't care how weird, big, and ambiguous it is, hey, I can do that, because it comes down to boot computer, hit key, walk into hardware store, buy nails, open mouth, say word, it really does come down to fairly simple stuff. If you could just keep your brain focused on that, as opposed to freaking yourself out about the future.
Yeah, and that's what you call, in getting things done, that's called natural planning, right?
Well, the natural planning model was just identifying what we actually do in our minds to come up with the next action.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going out to dinner or you do anything, say, wait a minute, what's my intention here? What's the vision of having accomplished it? And then you brainstorm real quickly, what are all the potentially meaningful things to make your vision happen? And then you start to organize it, and then you come down to a next step.
Mm-hmm.
So that is naturally how we get, how we do anything.
Yeah, although I find that the two most important steps that aren't really that common practice are the first two, like asking the why question, why am I exactly doing this, and what does it look like if this was a great success for everybody?
Yeah.
And those are two steps, because when you do natural planning, obviously desired outcome, first steps, do blah, exactly. But thinking about certain things, and that helps me eliminate procrastination, is why exactly is this a desired outcome? Because the task itself it's not fun, it's daunting, it's horrible. But if I do this, then I unlock this, and then that enables me to do that.
Yeah, as well, now that we're in the world of knowledge work, getting out the door is one thing, but designing a new piece of software is another. And asking yourself. So anything when it gets a little more complex, asking the why question or whatever. I just talked to Jake Knapp, who's just written a new book. That he works at Google, and he was the guy who sort of built the 5-day, launch, inside of Google. And he's a huge GTDer, and he said, one of the most powerful things he got from GTD is the idea of wild success. So what would wild success look like? And starting with the end in mind, essentially, and starting with outcome thinking, and training yourself to outcome thinking really is a muscle. That you can practice and work with, because again, the negative thinking or not thinking at all is pretty easy.
When did you get into the mindfulness training, vision kind of training, goal setting? Is that something that came early in your life?
Not really. I discovered when I was involved in a lot of the sort of personal growth training stuff back in the 70s and 80s in California, very heady time. A lot of stuff was going on there, and a lot of pioneering in terms of sort of intensive self-development kinds of training and self-awareness. And there was a whole lot there about sort of affirmational thinking and the power of that. And about 1980, 81 is when I really ran across a model of creating affirmations, and how powerful that was, and how powerful imagery was. And there's, just how your brain, holding a picture in your mind affects perception or performance. And that's not a religion, that's not a belief system, that's actually a fact. As you think, you holding images in your mind, automatically affects your physiology. If you think about red, the color red, and look around the room, it'll pop out at you. Because simply what you do when you just focus on red, there's a part of your brain that says, oh, you want red, watch this. And you're unconsciously made conscious of information. So that's how, you start to think about a car you want to buy, or a motorcycle or whatever. You start to see them everywhere. So that, it's essentially an integral part of the whole idea of the law of attraction. Like, as you think, so that you actually start to create perceptive filters that start to automatically have that stuff start to show up. So I was fascinated by all that back then. And so, I spent probably, I don't know, once I ran across that model, I said, let me prove this wrong as fast as I can, because if this is right, then I don't want to miss a day of being able to understand the power of just a framework internally, mentally, in your imagination and in your vision, how much that affects everything.
Definitely.
Before I even started with you guys, I said, hey, what would wild success with this look like? How do I want to feel at the end of this thing? So, almost every moment of the day, and they've estimated you've got about 50,000 thoughts. Each one of those could be some sort of a positive outcome. So it's an infinite opportunity to improve, I think, our lives by training ourselves to put our attention where we want it. Another big vote for GTD is to clear your head, so that then you can focus, put your attention on some of those wild outcomes and excited things without feeling, that you're even creating more problems than you're solving.
Well, this is touching on one of the main benefits that GTD has brought me, and that is the fact that it enabled me to sort of stem the flow of mental imagery and the effect it had on my body. Because when GTD came into my life, I was very close to a burnout, because I had too many desired outcomes and I was feeling overwhelmed, which were all intangible if you think about it, but they had a very physical, very measurable effect on my body. And that was, looking back at it, caused by way too much cortisol in my body. And I find it fascinating that something that you cannot touch. For example, the prospect of a tough talk you have to have with someone that actually does something measurable to your hormone levels in your body. And if you have too much cortisol for too long, well, that's not healthy for you at all. And that's what GTD sort of did for me, was sort of build up a defense against all these things that were negatively impacting me because it caused too much stress.
Yeah. Well, yeah, life's like that. I mean, the relaxation, as I make the point, is that your highest performance and your greatest health is going to come from being relaxed.
Yeah.
Relaxed does not mean unconscious and slothful. It just means relaxed. If you're going to run a 4-minute mile, you damn well better relax before you do it. And I mean, come on, really, really top athletes, what do you see them doing a whole lot of before they perform? Stretching and relaxing, because that then optimizes your ability to perform. Yeah. And the cognitive scientists have now discovered that you need as much sleep and you need as much just daydreaming time during the day in order to be able to let the focusing and attention muscle relax, because it gets tired.
Yeah.
That part of your brain called, and by the way, fabulous book out there called Brain Chains by a Belgian researcher.
You have it. Yeah.
Compernolle.
Yeah. Fabulous stuff. And Theo's a great guy. We've met and interesting. He hadn't run across my stuff before he wrote the book. So he wrote the book and he said, "Well, gee, David, he's done 30 years of research. I've done 30 years on the street, and we came to the same conclusion.
Yes,
your head sucks as an office."
That's nice.
Yes.
What's the time period for being focused? I mean, if you look at your working days, what do you think of our office culture, where we work 8 to 9 hours a day and you have to be focused all the time, sort of. At least that's what they're trying, but it's not very applicable. How do you manage your day? What is your actual working time during the day? Or do you...
I don't do anything consistently except wake up. I and even that's questionable sometimes. I sleep as long as I can.
Yeah.
And I don't make any plans at all whatsoever. My rule of thumb is basically what most got my attention. I want to try to handle first, and then I can snack and play the rest of the day. In other words, sometimes that's what's the hardest email that I got to write right now or respond to, and I want to take that pressure off myself as best I can. But I haven't found any particular time of the day. I'm a night person. I'm a morning person. I'm a late morning person. I'm at any time. But I have started over the last 3 or 4 years taking naps in the afternoon, which really help a ton. Much better than a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
It's sort of that, practicing that sort of refresh time. But I just, once you really get this methodology, I just suggest people do what you feel like doing.
That sounds great. We just spoke to the CEO of the biggest soccer clubs in the Netherlands, PSV, and he was talking about working ahead for 2 months. So make sure the next 2 months, all the stuff that you have to do is done, or at least you have it on paper and it's all sorted out. And then there's time for creativity, and you have a clear mind. You can do the stuff you want. Do you think it's manageable working 2 months ahead?
I'm not sure what you mean by working 2 months ahead. I mean, basically, when I do weekly reviews, I'm looking at my calendar as far out as there's anything on my calendar.
Yeah.
I'm looking backwards to make sure I've caught anything that I've missed. Go, oh shit, that reminds me. I want to grab all those. And looking forward to go, I need to do that. And so lifting up and getting a much higher altitude, it's really all about perspective. Perspective, by the way, is the slipperiest and most valuable commodity you have on this planet. You could have a terrible stress that you're going through, or trauma, or tough times in life, and you could still be on top of your world with the right attitude with that. And you could have what looks like a fabulous life and want to take your life if you don't have the right altitude, about what you're doing. So managing perspective, and a lot of what GTD is about, is building the orienting maps. What map do I need to see to feel comfortable where I am right now in space and time? So your people need a map for 2 months. I need to look out and take a look at that in order to feel comfortable. Before if you looked at your calendars or your diaries, that's looking at a map. Oh, well, let me locate myself in space and time. Today I looked at it and I had to look at when are the trains and what I'm going to do. And I've got, one of our staff is coming in from Colombia this afternoon, and I looked at that, and we have dinner reservation. So, I got my map for the day.
Yeah.
And, that helps to let my nervous system start to be comfortable about that, so that when I'm on the train or nothing surprises it. So a lot of that is just mental rehearsal, so that the nervous system is used to these things, so that you're alleviating as much stress as possible just ahead of time.
Yeah.
But it's all about orienting. How do you, what should you look at to orient yourself for the weekend with your family? What do you need to orient yourself when you're having a staff meeting, in order to be able to walk in there? So generating the content that needs to be in these maps, having these maps available to you in some way, shape, or form, and then being able to see them at the right time is really all about, sort of optimizing, how you're using your energy here on the planet.
Yeah.
So yes, I would agree. If that's what you need to get that off your mind, fabulous. What do you need to do to get anything off your mind? And for that, everybody would need to customize themselves, because I don't know what's on your mind. You can fool me, but not yourself.
Yeah.
Right? So what's on your mind, and then say, what do you need to do to get that off your mind? And that may be, I need to park it somewhere and trust that I'll see it every 7 days, which is why the weekly review is such a phenomenally powerful habit to build in to make sure all this stuff sticks and works.
Well, I think you were ahead of the curve with the weekly and the monthly, the daily and the weekly reviews, in the sense that it was the first step towards working in iterations. Because I think GTD resonated very much with tech guys. We're from tech companies as well. Is the fact that it connects to principles that are used, like Scrum or Kanban, for instance. It kind of integrates flawlessly.
It's agile.
It's agile, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's nice. A little bit more about drawing the maps you were talking about earlier. Is this what also relates to the instrument that I loved in getting things done, about getting oversight, the 0 to 50,000 feet perspectives? That's what we're talking about here.
Well, that's part of it. There are multiple maps within multiple maps within multiple maps.
Depending on your altitude.
Well, yeah. I mean, even on the ground level, you've got the map of your calendar. You also have the map of all the calls you need to make. You have the map of all the agendas to go over. That's still all ground level. What generates that would be some of the other horizons. And you'll notice, by the way, we used to use, in the first edition, we used feet and 50,000. Now we've changed it to horizon 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and ground. Why? We're international. Not everybody uses feet.
Yeah, that is true.
Right. So we use the sort of the hotel analogy, or the hotel elevator analogy. So the U.S. and only 2 other countries, I think, have the ground floor as number 1. So we do ground, and then project horizon would be horizon 1. And then what drives your project's horizon 2 would be all the areas of accountability and responsibility that you're responsible for. Horizon 3 would be then a future think about where do you need to go in the next 3 to 24 months? What's got your attention there and the content there? Horizon 4 is the big vision you have in terms of career or lifestyle or the company, in terms of the long-term picture of that. And Horizon 5 would be your ultimate intentionality and values, the purpose and your principles. The big one. So those are you're right. Those are very discrete and delineated horizons that we all have, either consciously or unconsciously, and they all have very different content. And so those would be maps you would certainly need to look at. Your strategic plan would be an orienting map, right? Your job description would be at Horizon 2. That would be an orienting map. What are the things you're going to be held accountable to have done well?
Yes.
If you're kind of into, hey, I want to make sure I have a healthy, balanced life and lifestyle, creating that Horizon 2 map called how's finances, how's my relationships, how's my, health and vitality, how's my environment, how's my sense of service, how's my sense of fun, So building these kind of orienting maps for yourself, these kind of templates to look at to make sure you're not missing anything, those are very, very powerful. And that's why having an external brain, that's an infinite amount of things you could stick in there that could potentially produce value for you.
Yeah. Do you have a good way for people to jumpstart themselves into thinking about the higher altitude horizons? Because when you talk to people about, all right, give me action level things, it's probably pretty easy. Give me 10,000 or a level 1. Give me the 1 year projects. Give me responsibilities. But then when it starts going to 1 to 2 or 3 to 5 years, let alone the big question, people have a hard time coming up with where they want to go. How do you jumpstart people that struggle with that?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, there are people that make their whole careers in terms of coaching and lifestyle coaching, and sure, and there's a lot of ways that one could start to address that. In terms of kickstart, I just tend to approach things pretty simply. I would just say, "Gee, Michelle, where do you want to be 5 years from now? What would you like to have true?" It's in a sense that simple. I mean, the problem is goal setting and vision setting and purpose. Everybody's made that so serious. My point of view is lighten up. Set a goal and change it this afternoon if you find a better one.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever truly achieved a specific goal in my life.
It's not set in stone, is what you mean.
Well, what happens is it's nice to have something that gets you moving, for sure.
Yeah.
But, for instance, if I set a goal like, wow, I want to get to the corner of the room over there. So I say, okay, so I get up, I start moving toward the corner of the room. I get halfway there and I go, oh, shit, wait a minute. That's really where I wanted to go. And then I just start off in that direction. Yeah. I never got to the corner, but I couldn't have seen the new thing without maturing myself toward the first one. So, that's why I pick something, that gets you moving. But don't be too tied up about it.
Yeah, so you gain new insights and you can have your, new direction.
Sure.
Probably, yeah.
You'll be another day older tomorrow, no matter what you're holding in your head. And some vision of that is a whole lot better than, oh, my life sucks, So.
Yeah, that's very true. So was it, well, that kind of answers my next question, but I'm going to, ask it nonetheless. But was it always clear for you what you were going to do, your 50K, so to say?
Are you kidding?
No, probably not, right? Looking at all the jobs you had.
Still not.
It's still not.
Are you kidding?
Is it more defined now that you're on this GTD bandwagon, so to say?
Yeah, well, 50,000 was pretty much clarified for me when I got involved in spiritual work. As I started to actually experience, how all the different levels, in terms of who we are and what that's about, and actually started to taste some of that reality. I mean, that was pretty clear that, top level game for me was to keep going with that and do that as best I could, and basically find out, what the upper levels of consciousness and spirit are before I die, to find that out, and found out that there are actually ways to do that. So that's kind of when you actually experience that, that's a pretty profound driver, in terms of priorities. But in terms of what I was going to do in the world, that took a long time for me to start to, sort of catch that. And I had a good friend who coached me on that to begin with, that really kind of got me on the path of just professionally after all those, I don't know what I want to do, because frankly, it was the spiritual stuff that was more important to me. Yeah. So how do you then set goals here when here sucks, relative to that, or it doesn't suck, but it's, and then I discovered, God obviously doesn't want me to leave anytime soon. As long as I'm here, and probably there's a good reason for me to be here. So let me just try to figure that out. And I had a friend just coach me on it. He was great. He said, David, what's your biggest fantasy? And I think that's a good way to approach it. Called, don't embarrass yourself. Just go, what's the fantasy that you would have? And I said, at the time, this was, be president of the United States. And he said, why? Because when I was 9 years old, I carried a penny around with me because it had the picture of Abraham Lincoln on it. And Lincoln was, even as a kid, I just intuitively said, I want to be, well, when he asked me, he said, why did I want that? I said, I want people's attention because I have a real driver to help people. That's a deep, deep value of mine, is to facilitate people improving their lives, in any way, shape, or form that's positive. And so I said, I would get people's attention. He said, well, what could you do now that could start to get people's attention? And I went, oh, God. Okay, and I had an idea then about what I could do to start down that path of the experience that I wanted that was inherent in the fantasy. So, frankly, I don't want to be president of the United States.
There was something else about it.
No, thanks. But it was what was the driver or the pull in there? And that was, God, we're talking 1979, 80, way, I'm 70 now, so keep in mind that.
I was born in 79.
So he gave you some.
You young whippersnapper. Yeah. Really. So that helped a lot, and it got me on the path. By the way, just a curious story, since you're talking about, visualization and the law of attraction. When I came across the affirmational process, I thought, this is so powerful. But I agonized about, I don't know what to affirm, because I didn't know what I wanted to. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And then I had the big aha. It says, I don't have to know what it is. I want to have the experience of knowing it. Yeah. So one of my first affirmations was, I know what I want. So I didn't know what the content was, but what I wanted was to have that sense of confidence I saw other people had who seemed to know what they wanted, and that was what I was after.
That's the part that's what spoke to you most when looking at presidents? Their confidence and their...
Not presidents, but I would looked around and said, I know what I want, and that was 6 months before I'd had this other conversation, and I was then had been affirming and affirming and affirming to get a place inside of me comfortable with knowing what I wanted. Because the way the comfort zone works is whatever you're used to, you'll automatically default to. And I was used to being confused about what I wanted. So all I did was, I did the meta game here of actually restructuring internally my own conditioning about feeling confident that I knew what and every time I read that affirmation, I would do it every morning. I had 30, 40 affirmations I would just read while I was having coffee. And I would just imagine myself in that state. And I just imagined myself feeling confident, feeling on, but I didn't even know what would cause me to do that. I just wanted to create the comfort with that feeling. And then when my friend asked me those questions, boom, that thing was able to pop into gear, and I had a sense of now then what I wanted to do.
That's neurological conditioning.
Exactly.
It's like spiritual psychotherapy.
Basically,
basically.
Sure.
But I think a lot of people are a destination addict. Once I get there, I'll be happy. Once I get more money, I'll be happy. And it's a shift of perception, you want more attention from other people? Start now, do it in your own level.
And it's funny because then you are affirming that you're not happy.
Yeah.
Just that thought, I will be, that's why affirmation should be done in the present. So you start to feel comfortable with the present tense. Because people keep, I'm going to be rich one day. I'm going to be rich. You start affirming that. Then what happens, you actually start to get rich. You'll let go of it because you're not almost there. Yeah. So people then start to affirm almost in their life.
I went to a seminar last year of Elliot Hulse, who's a fitness and health guru on YouTube, millions of followers. I went to him to London, and we did exercises about affirmations and visualizations. And he told about having what's the most powerful moment in your life where you really felt like, and I have this picture on my Facebook where I won a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu match. Was in the semi-finals in Rome. And I have this picture where I just won and I just screamed. It's really like in the action picture.
You went Super Saiyan.
That is the moment. If I really concentrate and I think back about that moment, how did you feel at that moment? I just you lit goosebumps, up. So, and he was talking about doing your affirmations and connect them to thinking about that moment, because you have your thought and you have your feelings. Combine those two and you have a very powerful thing. So if I think about my goal setting for my companies or whatsoever, combining with that winning ultimate glory feeling, that's you have the warrior here.
Sure. Well, you're just adding emotion. Emotion are just the juice that fires the image. You can do it in a lot of different ways, but even in the most just mundane way, one of the powers why GTD is so powerful, that when you build these external maps, if you look at a list of all of your projects, when you're looking at them, you're not going, that's a terrible project. You're seeing them done. So interestingly, when you see things done, you see how to get them done, the way the brain works. So, the reticular filter in the mind says, if you don't see yourself doing it, you won't see how to do it. So seeing yourself already doing it gives you the how. The how then, you wouldn't recognize the how if it kissed you in the face unless you hold the picture of doing it. That's how you catch a ball. You don't try to figure out which muscle group explodes when in order to meet the trajectory of the calculus. No, you don't. You just see yourself catching it. And they still don't know quite how all those connections were made. But that's actually how you do it. So even as mundane as doing a weekly review, looking at your list of projects, you're seeing 35, 40, 50 projects done. And that starts to then create the affirmation of them being done. And then that starts to create the motivation to be able to then, feel feel what that is. And you'll feel uncomfortable, creatively uncomfortable, until you are able to mark it off, or at least appropriately engage with it.
Does this work with the tough ones as well? Because there are projects on my project list. When I see them, I get a knot in my stomach because they require me to go outside of my comfort zone so much. I'm like, no, and I sort of shy away from it.
Sure. Well, that you can go up, and it helps to go up and down. Why do you have that project? Because there may be there's some bigger reason.
Well, we usually get back to the why question, and then I know why it's there again. But
you get back, and then go the other way too. Well, what's the next step? As you know, next action on those things are not freaky. So you just have to train yourself. But again, that's a lifelong art about how to train yourself to be just thinking affirmationally about all these things. At a certain point, both with GTD, let me put it this way. There's a maturing process with this, as well as I think with the affirmational process. The maturing process with GTD is up until a certain point, you will fall off the GTD wagon when life throws you a curve. Wow, I just got sick, or I just had to go on a 3-week trip, or all this stuff happened that I didn't expect, so I fell off. At a certain point, when those things happen, that gets you on. Wow, I just got thrown a curve. I need to sit down and get my head clear. I need to now reframe and recalibrate everything and get your system caught up to date so that you can then address that appropriately. At a certain point, that will happen. That's very mature with this game. But the same is true with starting to recognize when you're feeling resistance about something. Like when I start to feel resistance about, I say, boom, I may sit down and actually write an affirmation about that being done well and actually get myself into the process of just recognizing, okay, dude, you need to make yourself more comfortable. Yeah. So when if I'm asked to, speak in front of a group that I just have no idea who they are or what they're about, I was just asked to give a keynote for 80 executives of a global company in Baku, Azerbaijan. Now, where's Azerbaijan? I didn't even know. Give me a map. Where's the Google map? Where is that? And so I had no idea what I was going to walk into or run into, never having been in that part of the world. And so I literally sat down and wrote an affirmation call. It's easy for me, it's comfortable, and people are excited, and I visualized the outcome and so forth. So you can train yourself to start to recognize when those things are hitting at you, why am I resisting that picture? And then sit down and just and practice. It's like first aid.
Yeah, I was gonna go back a little bit in time because I bought it in several years ago, the first version, and I remember there were a lot of physical things coming in, like bank statements in the form of letters and stuff, and I thought it was very male orientated, and now living. Almost a decade later, I've got WhatsApp coming in. I've got Facebook messages coming in. All this stuff, and I kind of felt lost. At one moment, I even felt like getting things done was really an office thing, And now it's a new age. It's different. It doesn't work anymore. And I still sometimes have problems getting my WhatsApp organized, Facebook, how to handle. How are we going to handle it?
Same way you handle it to begin with. Look, somebody stops you in the hall, asks you to do something, or they send you an email for it. There's no difference. It's just input you've just let in your life. So I don't care if the input's digital. I don't care if you thought of it in a dream and woke up with the idea. It's still input. So there's no difference in how you deal with input. What's different is, of course, the volume that you've got. And the fact is, I was just talking to somebody that loves using Evernote as a system. And he said, but the problem is Evernote is capture only. He's spending all day just, sticking crap in there and never spending any time curating any of that stuff. So he never even looks at where he threw all of it. Yeah. So that doesn't work either. No. So just the fact that you've got all those tools and all those methodologies doesn't change the fact that, hey, if there's still stuff in there that some part of you says I might, would, could, should, ought to decide something about something potentially meaningful in it. Now you've just added, more to that sort of pressure, internally. Yeah. So you're going to have to decide how to curate that stuff. That's why you need to get fast at it, and you need to make a decision about it. The digital world is very, very dangerous, simply because it is so easy for it to be a black hole. Yeah. So much stuff can go in there, and you forget where you put it. You didn't know in there, and then as soon as it goes in there, and it's not in some trusted bucket as a capture bucket that you're emptying regularly, and curating and deciding, wait a minute, that's reference, that's crap. Let me get rid of that or whatever. That principle doesn't change.
But I think that's the answer to the question. It's handling with you should handle it with buckets, because these are input channels, and by filtering them and applying the protocol, the rules for is this actionable, yes or no, you can sort of guide it to one of the buckets that you enter regularly. Because my Facebook and my WhatsApp my WhatsApp is, by the way, which is a great bucket to store things. If you hadn't noticed, you can send yourself WhatsApp messages. I actually do this. You can add yourself to your phone, look yourself up in WhatsApp, And you can send yourself little text messages or voice messages, which makes it an excellent bucket to store things in as long as you process it regularly.
Yeah. I do just the opposite. I use something actually two Dutch guys built, great little tool called Brain Toss. And, I can record on that, and it automatically sends that into my email, because my email then is my in-basket bucket. So instead of leaving it in there as a storage place, it automatically goes into a trusted bucket that I
Brain
use.
Toss.
Yep.
That is excellent.
Yeah, two guys in Amsterdam. But fabulous tool.
Yeah.
That's great.
Great.
Yeah, I like to cancel all automatic push messages. I don't want to be walking down the hallway. Somebody grabs you. It's the same with your phone. You get your calls, you get your messages, and with every beep, you're gonna look at it. So, it drains all the energy out.
It grabs attention, but you can turn off the beeps.
I turn off the beeps, but I also turn off, like, my first screen on my iPhone is almost empty.
Yeah.
And no WhatsApp, no pop-ups, and no whatever.
True.
So, and that works pretty well. So I try to force myself to look twice a day at it, do my things, and get rid of it.
Well, I don't think there's. I mean, my iPhone screen is full of all kinds of stuff, FaceTime and Facebook and.
But you're a black belt in getting things done.
Yeah, and a lot of that. See, I deal with all those like a cocktail party. You wouldn't spend your life in it, but it's nice to wander in and out. So I don't have any commitments internally that I have to do anything about any of that. But hey, sometimes that's a great way to let your brain relax a little bit, just kind of surf around. So I love all that stuff. I just have no attention on anything lying in there.
Yeah.
If that's been curated as it's come in, if it is something I'm going to do something about, that goes into my system.
Exactly.
In some way, shape, or form. And, there are a lot of ways to do that. You get pretty facile on your iPad and your iPhone. You can send yourself stuff, but I don't think on my iPhone. That's too small a space.
Sometimes I actually grab my iPhone, open up an app or internet or whatsoever, and then after 5 seconds I'm thinking, why am I doing this?
Why am I
There was no goal whatsoever. Put it away, it's just...
It's an addiction.
It is.
I'm an addict.
Read
I knew it.
Teo's stuff.
How to handle addictions.
Yeah,
those kind of addictions.
Yeah, well, you go on a diet, turn off the phone. See, one of the reasons people get caught into an addictive pattern, and that is random positive reinforcement. And there's no, aside from golf, there's no more addictive thing from random positive reinforcement than social media. As a matter of fact, the more random it is, the more addictive it is. Mm-hmm. So if you only get one cool email or one cool WhatsApp for 99, you still come back. I don't know if you ever played golf, but one good drive will keep you coming back and hit 1,000 bad ones.
Yeah.
So if you were trying to get rid of that, you've really got to turn it off, and get used to not paying attention to the ding. Because in Copernolli's book, he even quotes a research study that was done that even just having that phone in your pocket, wondering what's on there, creates a dopamine rush in your head.
Yeah.
So that's all of that is very, very tricky. It's tricky business to do that. The problem is most people aren't doing GTD. They're not cleaning up all their backlogs, so they're constantly living in emergency scan mode.
Yeah.
I'm not in emergency scan. I can go all day and not look at any of that because I've got no backlog, or my backlog's pretty small.
Yeah.
So I'm not sitting there wondering, oh my God, what am I missing? What am I missing? What should I be doing? What should I be doing? And if you get into that, that's very easy to then get into the addictive behaviors.
Taps into Wicked's remark about enjoying your free time more if you have a good system to back you up, because I can relax now because the system catches everything.
Yeah,
sure.
It's weird how it goes, man. Like when I was 19 years old, which is 14 years ago, 15 years ago, I went to go backpacking for 3 months, and I actually left my phone because it was way too pricey to call at the time. Going to Thailand or wherever.
Yeah.
For 3 months, no phone, and it felt great. And I didn't even miss the thing, And then I got back, and I was really like, I don't even want it, but you kind of need to in this new world. Right now, going back into it, I just been busy with a tech startup for the last 3 years, and I just sold it. So in September, I'm going off to the Amazon. Digital detox. Yeah. No phones, Indians, jungle. That's it. You know, and I'm looking forward to it. Yeah,
same here. It's gonna be nice and quiet.
It's gonna be quiet for you. Yeah, that's true. But it's weird how we get so distracted by all these things that are actually not really that important.
That thing about the jungle that kind of got me off a tangent again, because one of the the things we like to think about is a little bit of spirituality. I already heard you say a couple of things that you are actually, quite spiritually aware. And in doing my research, I found out that you are, I think, a minister in the movement of spiritual inner awareness.
Correct.
What is the movement of spiritual inner awareness? I mean, I can read the text from the wiki page, but it's probably more fun if you tell us.
Well, it's just a set of essentially educational information relative to the practice of sort of practical spirituality.
Practical spirituality.
Yeah, meaning, hey, try something. If it works, try something else. See if that works. Works toward what? Well, the end game, basically of this is getting off the planet. That is, stop the re-embodiment process, which can go on for gazillions of years. The idea of actually merging with the higher levels of spirit and God and consciousness, and we're all in all of that all the time. We're only just aware of barely 10% of it, in the material world that we're in here. So the fact is that you don't have to wait till you die to actually taste what some of those other levels are. And the spirit is a very delicious thing, and it's profound when you get a chance. And I'm not fully there at all, but I have had certainly tastes of the reality of that, and it's much more real than right here.
What did those tastes look like?
Well, kind of hard to put it into words. It's
try.
How did you get them?
Yeah, one was just truly driving along one of those freeway moments, and suddenly I just was in a transcendent form of consciousness and saw what we refer to as the sound current, which is the flow of energy that really is the essence of the universe. Yeah. And love is probably it's the only word that you might actually use to start to describe kind of what it's all about, but it's even that is so minor relative to the experience of it. And basically understanding that, I actually wrote a poem about it. A moment is coming toward you when all things of this world will reveal themselves as but shimmering shadows on a mighty rolling ocean of ecstasy, as but echoes of a divine symphony, pulsing, streaming forth into the universe, and your being shall dance to the heartbeat of God. So having had that experience, it's kind of like, okay, that's the game, guys, and everybody's in it, and nobody's going to be lost, and it's all designed for us to learn what we need to learn in the process.
That's very interesting, because that makes a lot of sense. So what you're basically saying is that this is the soul transcendence that you guys talk about in spiritual awareness, of inner awareness. But what you're saying is that you're sort of like a soul that's aging here, and the goal is to mature enough not to have to come back here.
Correct.
That's interesting.
That makes a lot of sense somehow.
And the thing, going back to law of light and energy, it really resonates with DMT experiences, ayahuasca kind of things. And basically what you just described, ask anyone who did ayahuasca, who smoked DMT and got in this realm of, I don't know, space, spirituality and love, will say the same thing. And I think people with a high level of meditation practice will have the same. What kind of meditation practice are you in? And
well, we also work with a particular spiritual energy form, and many of the different spiritual groups and so forth have their own sort of energy form. Oftentimes, if there's a master or a guru or someone who work that channels that, and ours was channeled by something. It's a consciousness we refer to as the mystical traveler. You can call it whatever you want, but there's always somebody that holds that energy field on the planet. The sound current I mentioned, by the way, the Shabda Yoga. Anybody looks that up, there's a that's a whole energy field, and there are initiatory tones that you
is that a spiritual concept, or is this actually a measurable thing? The energy field you were referring to?
I don't know if that is measurable. It's certainly experiential.
All right.
You can certainly experience it. You get around somebody who's manifesting that, and things lift. Things get lighter, things get easier, things get more.
Yeah, because one of the facets that fascinated me about what you guys do is your spiritual exercises, which I guess are sort of like the affirmations we were talking about before.
Not really. You can do affirmational processes that kind of get you into that mode, but basically they're very active. They're not like trying to get everything off your mind. It's like channeling your mind, because the spirit is, we're on the physical. We have, astral imaginative bodies, we have emotional bodies, we have mental bodies, we have unconscious bodies, and then you're up to the soul, and then there are multiple levels above that. So anything that you do in your mind is still at the mental level. However, if you can organize all of your energies in a certain way and you work the process appropriately at a certain point, you get to kind of lift above all that. It's kind of like, if you're exercising, many times you start transcending the exercise itself and you get into another space, in that way. And it's exactly the same kind of thing. So there are, and again, when I say it's very practical, hey, use any technique that works, that helps keep you focused in a way so that you open up to the possibility of spirit touching to you. And that's a very real thing. So I practice that all the time.
Are you using what caught my eye was the fact that some of these spiritual exercises apparently have an element of chanting sacred Sanskrit in your mind?
Yeah.
You actually do that? All right. Well, so what are these chants for? There are specific chants? Are they like prayers?
Well, they're aligned with the different levels that we are existing on, to the sort of the supreme beings in those levels. And
you're actually addressing entities in these chants.
You're lining up with them. You're not talking, or you can. I guess you could if you want to. But really, the whole thing is let go and let God. Find out what that other thing is, and that's not like giving up, in some blind way. Essentially, all of it is paradoxical if you try to put it into, cognitive terms. But the paradox is that it is much bigger than us, but we are it. And so once you get there, you realize, God, I am it, and it's me. But then you have to be careful not let your ego sort of take over. And
this is so very similar to the ayahuasca experience, because I saw you nodding when you're aware of what it is. Have you experienced it?
No, I haven't experienced it, but I know people who played in that game and in that arena.
What's your opinion on that?
Hey, anything that works.
Because if you ask Christians, they're like, no, that's demonology, that's wizardry. You shouldn't do that. But this kind of, if it works for you, it's good.
Absolutely. I mean, this is any path there is it. Probably the MSIA, which is the group that I work with, it probably closest to something that that might be more familiar to a number of people would be esoteric Sufism. So if you know the Sufis and how the Sufi approach to things, it's very similar kind of energy, very non-denominational and very sort of universal, and kind of however you get there, and sort of
as long as you get there.
We call it sacred irreverence, So everything is it, and there's everybody's got their own path to get there, and we're not actually. The last thing in the world is being a proselytizer. You'll find out, but you ask. So I don't. You haven't heard me talk much about it, but nobody's asked that much about it.
I was just wondering, because it apparently also has elements of Christianity in it, but apparently also Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, a lot of these things. Just wondering from a theological standpoint, so there's a pantheon you guys have? You have the mystical traveler, apparently. He's like the head honcho, and there's other guys?
There's like messengers.
Angels.
Essentially. Yeah, there's all of that. I mean, there's... there are many mansions, as they say in the Bible, lots of them, and lots of multiple different levels of complexity. And again, I've barely tasted some of them consciously that I could bring back.
It's unlimited.
A lot of our work is done in the dream state. Working out, clearing karma and so forth in that way. It's a lot easier to dream it and then get it cleared there than to have to go through it.
Like lucid dreaming.
Yeah.
So you have the ability to dream lucidly?
Well, I don't know. I don't really work hard at much of anything. It just, if you work with this energy that we work with, oftentimes, as long as you commit to being on this path, this energy, you work with this energy, and oftentimes you will come back and you'll wake up and realize that you were having an experience that's actually a teaching and a learning experience.
All right, that's something. When I mean lucid dreaming, that's apparently the ability to, when you're in the dream, to realize you're in the dream and to do your work while you're in the dream. Sometimes.
Yeah.
Right.
That's just being mindful in your own dreams.
Yeah.
I want to go back to the Sanskrit chants, because when was it? Like 5 weeks ago, I did this ayahuasca ceremony with a Brazilian shaman. He had an apprentice shaman who kind of mixed different cultures into it. And he sung a chant from Sanskrit which supposedly has been sung for 24 days, 24 hours a day, every time.
You told me about this. Yeah,
all through the year, because that kind of it's the energy of the earth, all this kind of stuff. I don't know the details, but it was very powerful at the moment. And for some reason, these Sanskrit mantras, they're very powerful, and especially when
they can be, sure.
When you're opened up with all, maybe when you're in deep meditation or in ayahuasca session, it's amazing. It just, you can feel the energy going through it. So I don't know. I experience it as an energy that is going 24 hours a day, and is really driving what goes on.
Come on, the universe is always on, guys.
Yeah,
it doesn't take an off day.
It's always on. It's just us that decide to connect into it from time to time in whatever way we do.
Yeah.
So from this, as a soul, you have an idea what you want to achieve here on this planet. But is there a bigger purpose, a bigger end game in this philosophy? Like, we're all here to be just as benign as possible.
No,
it doesn't deal in moral absolutes in the sense that the Bible does. There's Satan and there's the devil, and
no, I don't.
Nothing like that.
Don't know what any of that is. No, it's all about just merging with the best and the highest that you can, as often as you can, and expressing it. That's my game.
Nobody's born perfect, but you have the mission to become perfect here.
Oh,
I guess. I think that's the one.
Well, I don't think perfection exists here. Excellence.
That would be better.
Yeah.
All right. I'm rephrasing.
Excellence.
And interesting. If you tie this back into why GTD was so attractive to me in a way, because I don't equate that with spirituality. Although, if you're on a spiritual path and do these kinds of reflective or contemplative or meditative exercises, it's certainly nice to have a clearer deck inside your head. And you better have a notepad when you sit down to meditate, because as you start to relax, I need cat food. It's going to pop into your head, so you better get that out of your head.
That's the hardest part on meditation for me. All the thoughts that keep on popping into your head.
But another enlightening moment that I had one time, and this was back when I was wondering, gee, what the heck am I going to do with my life? But I wanted to line up with the Spirit, and I want to make sure that it works and that it's for me and for my highest good and all that good stuff. And I had another one of those, just somehow it's on the freeway. I was driving along, and I just had this still small voice inside of me that said, David, relax. You do not need to worry about what you need to create. You have created so much in this lifetime and 6 million others that all you need to do is handle what's immediately in front of you with elegance and complete it with as much excellence as you can, and the next thing will automatically emerge. And I haven't turned back from that. So a lot of my stuff was just deal with what's in front of me really well, and I don't have to worry too much because I trust the Spirit's going to bring it to me.
That's a great procrastination killer. That mindset.
Yeah, and trust. Then there's a wonderful Arab saying, so trust in Allah and tie your camel.
That's the same as you can't meditate your way out of a tiger attack.
Right.
Yeah, that's very true.
So, how much of this practice has affected your GTD methodology?
Not really. Other than just, hey, live a good life and whatever you could do about it. But most of this did not come through any of that particular information or whatever. A lot of this is just it came out of the good personal growth called Grow Yourself. How do you deal with this level? And there's a lot of really good stuff there that we don't learn in school. How do you deal with rejection? How do you deal with honesty? How do you deal with agreements and commitments? How do you deal with it? How much does that affect your ability to just decisions you made about yourself because of how you were raised? How much does that affect your life now? Are you running your life as a 9-year-old based upon something? So there's all that kind of stuff.
Some of the times
I don't equate that with the spiritual work itself, other than the Spirit is alive and well in all of us all the time, and these explorations and this work to help get clearer and get better and more on top of it. And my experience is, that the Spirit and the spiritual side of who we are loves us, has infinite patience, will let us make as many mistakes as we want, and is always there. There's no rush in Spirit, as we say, about all of that. And at the same time, I think we have all decided to that we want to expand or express ourselves. If you felt like you haven't fully shown up yet on the planet, who is Victor? Who is Michelle? Who are you guys? And if you're not fully, if you feel like there's still an expansion or there's still something else inside of there, then that's going to be a pull that will keep your intention here. Yeah. So the funny thing is, that whole idea, that dichotomy of are we into doing, or are we into being? Well, in my experience, the people who are really, really into being are big doers.
Yeah.
And they seem to have a lot to do with each other here, because this level is a doing level. It's an active level. You can't just stop things going on here.
That brings me to one more thought. We were talking, in the beginning of the podcast, we were talking about the neurological evidence for the benefits of getting things done, right?
Right.
That you can actually measure some of these things. The conversation we're having right now sort of taps into the question of free will a little. And if you start looking at neurological evidence, then there are a lot of smart people that are saying that free will might be an illusion, more or less.
Yeah.
How do you look at that?
The way I look at that is you don't have free will, you have free choice. So you may have
What's the difference?
You may have had free will before you incarnated, with all the karmic boards and all the people that decided, okay, guys, here's your karma, here's all you've done. You get a chance to go work it out. And you go, yeah, man, that's really cool, fabulous. And so you had the opportunity on other levels to then pick a path that you wanted to get. But once you landed here, that path has parameters to it. And so
you make it sound like a computer game. There's this limbo where you're in and you get to decide, I'm going to be this guy.
Yeah, cool. And then once you land here, then it's not predetermined everything you're going to do. The structure and the game that you landed in was pretty well structured, but then your choices about which path you take win. And then that's a lot of what the training is for us here, is how good a choice do you make? Did you make a choice that was for fear or love? Did you make a choice that was contracting or expanding in terms of your consciousness? And I think that's a lot of what this game here on the planet's about. Yeah. So now you got a free choice. You can decide that's not predetermined, how you do it. What's predetermined is we're sitting in this room. We don't have a lot of choices about what we can do right now because we are constrained in this room, right? But we have a lot of choices about whether we want to stay in the room or not, what we do while we're in the room. But, in a way, it's that's my experience of it anyway. It kind of looks like that.
It resonates to one of the lessons that I had in that ayahuasca experience where everything is already predetermined. You get a little bit of space to do your own thing. So we think we have free will and you get your thing, do your things. But in the end, it's all predetermined. And that gave me so much confidence in just letting things go, living in the now. And it took me 22 ayahuasca sessions, but we're here.
Hey, look, anything. Chew bubble gum, and if it gets you to let go and be in the present, So
never underestimate the power of bubble gum.
Yeah.
That's why I say, this is practical stuff. But and there are a lot of techniques that allow us to start to tap into some of those kinds of things and some of those realities. What you don't want to do is get wrapped up around the technique.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a mold or it's a model, but nothing is,
So you're placing it outside yourself. Yeah. You're looking. Yeah. I understand it. It's funny. I didn't expect to have this conversation with you.
I didn't expect to have this conversation with you either. So
is this a part of wild success?
We're all in this game together.
I know a lot of people will be shaking their head like,
not again.
Why are you talking about this with David Allen? Because I just want to fucking do it, and I just did. So that's a good thing. Yeah.
All right. So we talked about getting things done for a little, but as an author and as a time management, as far as you can call it, time management guru, you haven't sat on your hands. There have been other books. You did a great review about getting things done because the first edition, it is true, it had been written prior to all the digital goodies we have now. So there was a revision on that. But you also published a book called Making It All Work. Mm-hmm. Perhaps it's interesting to talk about that a little bit more. What are the key points in making it all work that sort of complete getting things done, or is it a different framework altogether?
It was just took it a little wider and deeper. Why the first book hit such a nerve, and so it took a little bit deeper and a little more subtle about it. And I think a critical model that I introduced there is the matrix of self-management, essentially control and perspective, the two aspects of self-management and even organizational management. Anytime you or anybody else thinks they need better time management, productivity, prioritization, organization, is because one of those two dynamics is suboptimal. Either things are not feeling as in control as they need to be, or they don't feel as focused appropriately, meaningfully as they need to be. And so when I say control, by the way, I'm not talking about controlling your kids or the weather or your boss. I mean, good luck. I'm talking about having something under control, like a meeting or your car or your kitchen, or your consciousness. So control, then that's where, roll the tape back to the 5 steps I talked about. So there's 5 steps of how you get your kitchen under control. And then the perspective piece, then that brings in, that's why the horizons were so important. And I focused a good bit more on the horizons there, the 6 horizons that I mentioned before.
Yes.
So you could get your kitchen under control, but then the question is, should you be having guests over for dinner? So why, the big whys. And that's where you'd have to go into, am I focused appropriately? So I got my kitchen under control, but to what end? And why am I doing that? And so having an appropriate focus would then require you to then think about those different horizons. Am I having dinner with them because it's a horizon 2? I just like relationships with friends, and I want to keep that warm, and in terms of my life, in terms of balance. It could be a year. I've got a goal a year from now to graduate it in my company to some next level, so I'm inviting the boss and his life partner over for dinner. I want to get on their good side. Yeah. It could be your vision says, look, I want to be a great author, and I know somebody who's writing a book, and I'm going to invite them to dinner so I can do that. And it could be your life purpose. You maybe got a friend that's going through a major personal issue, and you want to bring them over and and give them a little informal ministry, if you will, and give.
We call that an intervention.
Yeah, something like that. So that's where that would then start to answer the why, because people say, yeah, I got under control, but how do I set priorities? So a little more detail on that's not such a simple ABC priorities. You've got a lot of other factors and variables that go into your gut saying, yeah, this is something I need to be doing versus not.
All right, but are you also saying that in that process of focus, what you're basically doing is trying to align your action level and your project level with your higher horizons?
Yeah.
That's basically what you're doing.
Yeah, that's basically what you would be doing. And just understanding those are different things. The horizons showed up when I had a senior guy in a very well-known company, brought me in to coach him and to work with him, and his presenting issue was his calendar. I mean, he was just blocked wall to wall for the last 2 or 3 months. His assistant was about to die trying to fend off everybody trying to get onto his calendar. And so, I walked down and closed the door. He said, David, what do I do about this? I'm scratching my head. I don't know what the hell to talk to this guy about. So I got a flash, and he had a whiteboard in his office. So I went up and I drew something like these different horizons. And I said, at which one of these horizons would you like to have this conversation about your meetings? And he said, he got it. I mean, this guy wasn't dumb. In a second, he got it. I said, what did you get? He said, I really realized it's not the issue is the meetings. The issue is I got teenage kids that are about to grow out from under me, and I'm trying to stick around and make partner by staying here till 11 o'clock at night. And he realized that was what was getting to him. And he needed to reframe some of, where he was allocating his time and how he was doing that. And so that's why I said, that's kind of interesting to then use that. And then I started to use those horizons and found out it brought a lot of clarity for a lot of people about a lot of stuff. And as opposed to trying to have it one big mushed thing called set goals and understand what your values are, those come at multiple different levels, and it's not that simple.
I think it's also a great example of how the piece of insight here is that he had goals on the one hand, but the real attention grabber were the kids, and those were from a different domain, namely not career, but just regular life in air quotes. Yeah. Which was also one of the big thing for me, the fact that it's all right to have these things as equal attention grabbers, because it's very socially acceptable, or we want to say the right things to everybody. So we're talking about career and business and how can we make the company more successful. Well, in fact, the real thing that you're on the job for is probably to gain, some sort of means or, money to do other stuff that's probably way more important to you, like go on a holiday with your family, or, make sure you have food on the table, if you go all Maslow on that. But
could be. But I've met kids that are 24. It's all an adrenaline rush. They get bored going home. So what's balanced for one person may look very
Yeah, it's
different
very-
than balanced for somebody else.
Difference per person.
Yeah. But it's nice to have that conversation to make sure that that's okay, and you don't let it go too long down some road you shouldn't have gone down, and you're going to have to retrace your steps if you made some bad judgment calls in terms of the choices that you had. Back to choices.
Yeah, that is true. When talking to people about working in these systems, like getting things done, and the extensions made in making it all work, I usually hear a lot of people say stuff like, but getting things done is too structured for me, or getting things done just adds to the stress because these lists, they apply extra mental pressure, or it takes too much time. These kind of rationalizations, and usually probably resistance. I guess you deal with that a lot as well.
I do. It's funny. People get pissed off at me about their list. I'm sorry, ain't my list, dude. That's yours. Your choice is where do you keep track of it. And I can tell you the difference.
They actually get upset?
No.
Or just a little frustrated and venting it?
This is a complaint. It's too structured. I go, well, what do you think about the line in the middle of the road out there when you're driving?
No.
That's a constraint. That's a structure. Yeah, but it's nice because then you don't have to think about a car hitting you. You can think about other things while you're driving. You don't want 72 lines in the road because then you'd be distracted about which lane you ought to be in.
Yeah.
But you need just the lanes that you need so that your mind is off of this and doesn't have to do that. And, I just had a conversation yesterday with somebody who was asking about the whole idea of creativity and GTD and how did they relate to each other. And quite frankly, GTD is quite popular in the entertainment and creative worlds out there right now.
Why?
Because basically what it does is it creates space. You don't need time, you need room. And the creative person just needs more room. What you do with that room is quite unique to you. Evan Taubenfeld's an old champion of my stuff. He was Avril Lavigne's guitarist and producer in the first part of her career. And Evan's a fabulous guy, brilliant, but a great musician. And he said before GTD, he started 100 songs a year. After GTD, he finished 100 songs a year. Yeah. Big difference. And a guy, I can use his name because we coached him, and then he's been on the air. I think probably the most well-known American radio personality. Howard Stern's a huge fan of my stuff, and
really?
I asked Howard about this. It totally changed his life and allowed him to learn to paint as well as keep up with all the huge businesses that he is, Sirius Radio, as well as major other projects that gave him the bandwidth to do that he never thought he could do before. So Joss Whedon, you could read Fast Company magazine where he talked about how he's the guy that did the Avengers and all that stuff, and he did sort of a current version of Much Ado About Nothing in his backyard. And
he started that with Buffy, didn't he, Josh Whedon? Yeah.
And he'd tell you next action thinking is what allowed him to get a lot of his recent stuff done as fast as it is. So people say, well, this is not creative. The Simpson writers, if you know the Simpsons, they're
heard about it.
They're GTDers. So what it does is just creates room. So whether somebody being creative wants more room or not, that's up to them. Yeah. But if they do, this is going to give you a lot more room to be able to do that.
Yeah. So you just counter the arguments with the benefits.
Yeah. And come on, it's not free. This stuff ain't free. You actually do have to invest in this thing. It does take some cognitive horsepower to sit down and actually walk yourself into this process. As you've talked about that.
I think the GTD is similar to going to the gym. If you want physical fitness, you need to start lifting heavy shit.
And because you do your GTD fitness, you get more free time, you get more benefits, just like you go to the gym, right?
I think getting things done, it never gets easier. You just get better at it.
Yeah,
you can train it.
I still have, improvement opportunities myself. But how much more value could I have produced today had I created appropriate context, appropriate content, and then structured it so I didn't have to think too much and I add more value.
What's a trap you still regularly run into?
What trap I run into?
Yeah.
What's a trap I run into? Oh, probably just my laziness. It's kind of funny once you get really good at this game. It's kind of dangerous because I let myself get totally out of control in chaos, whatever, because I know I can fix it very fast, and I don't have to bother, sometimes my in-baskets look way out of control. My emails get out of control. But, I don't let it go too far. But because I know the game, it makes it much more comfortable to not necessarily be, as tight and anal as everybody thinks I probably am. Most people get around me, they go, "Guy, you're nothing like what I thought you were going to be." That's why one of the reasons I rewrote the book was because, it was really, the first edition was really sort of buttoned down and targeted toward the fast track professional. But this is really a whole lifestyle thing, and that's a lot of what's changed is how many people and how much broader the market is of people very interested in this through all levels of life. We're now teaching this to 6 and 7 and 8-year-old kids, and as well as CEOs, still clergy, physicians, anybody who's got a busy life.
There's a kids version of Getting Things Done.
Well, the getting things done itself, it can be understood by a kid if you speak the kid's language. I mean, how old does a kid need to be to understand, gee, how would you like the party to be? What would you like to, what's the next step?
Not so
So as soon as they understand, outcome and action, how would you like the vacation to be? What would you like to do? What would really be cool? Right. Well, what's the next thing we think we need to do that might make that happen? And if kids 4, 5, 6 years old can actually start to, and they're not trained to think that is a cognitive muscle that doesn't show up by itself. You guys weren't born and turn around your mom and go, "Hi, Mom, what are we trying to accomplish? And what's the next step? Is that yours or mine?" This is learned behavior, but kids can learn it. We know now because there are, I think the oldest that I know is two twin girls that are now in their mid to late 20s that have been raised since they were born by a serious GTDer. They were homeschooled too, but these girls, the world is their oyster, man. They keep stuff in your head. Why would you do that? Of course you decide next actions on all this. I mean, they just were raised with this thought process.
It's totally ingrained in their system.
Yeah.
That's awesome. A little bit of a technical question about getting things done, but a thing I wrestle with is allocation. I just heard you say every now and then my inbox grows wild, and I know I can fix it. I sort of plan regular moments in my calendar to check my list because I find it very hard in a full day to just find an hour anywhere. And I sort of had the same problem with my task lists. Every now and then, next actions that show up are bigger than an hour. Every now and then, and I always have a hard time when I'm in my task list. I can just I don't have an hour now. I need to allocate this in my calendar. I usually just block it, and it's in 2 places at the same time.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
I don't have a lot of that in my lifestyle now, given just the nature of my work. I'm not nearly as operationally involved in a lot of the detailed projects that other people in the company are. But
you have minions now.
No, I'm still busy, but it's not. I get wider berths of time to be able to do kind of, in whatever timing that I want to do it. But given what you said, my mentor, the guy named Dean Acheson, who taught me a couple of the major pieces of this methodology back in the 80s, Dean would suggested that anytime you had a next action that would require an hour or more of uninterrupted time, you really should block that in your calendar. Yeah. You need to block that off, especially if you have that kind of a busy calendar. Otherwise, it'll gnaw at you.
Because it's not really in the protocol. You just put it on the next action list, and or on the calendar. But if it exists in both times, you
just have to be careful because you'll break appointments with yourself very easily unless you really hold to it. So
that is true because a lot of times if you block an hour and the reminder pops up, it's like, I'm going to do something else. You shouldn't do that because that kind of defeats the purpose. Yes,
it does. Well, nothing cures that like a deadline.
That is true.
And then nothing cures that like the weekly review that sees those deadlines coming toward you. And that then starts to make it a little bit more motivating to block a couple hours. Say, God, there's no way on God's green earth I'm going to be able to finish that business plan or that proposal or whatever by the due date if I don't block out half day on Wednesday and call nothing else going on there.
Yeah. I just jokingly talked about minions, and what I mean by that is that in every kind of organization you have to work together usually. Either you have people working for you, or you work together with people, or there are people you do stuff for. I don't know if it's really in line with the original philosophy of getting things done, but I took on the habit of writing everything down that someone is supposed to give to me or tell me, or because I noticed that if I trust their way of organizing, for example, I'm asking you, please give me the for example, the data of 2014 when it comes to sales. Like, that's something I could ask Wickard. And if I ask him a question like that, and it's important for me to get that information in order to do my part of the job, that goes straight into my getting things done. So I write down a lot of next actions of other people as well.
Smart.
Yeah?
Yeah, that's called a waiting for list.
Yeah, that's true. But I put it on my task list instead of the waiting for inbox thing.
Yeah, I stick it on waiting for because I review my waiting for on the weekly reviews. So I see if I need to kick butt, light fire, or check status on any of that myself.
Kick butt, fire, or check status.
Light fire, Anyway, so you just need to keep track of that and then decide what you need to do about it, if anything, to help move it forward. Mm-hmm. But people often ask, how do I get other people to do this? Well, it's almost impossible to legislate system to anybody, but you can hold them accountable to outputs.
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's true.
If you've agreed to the deliverable, then you keep track of that. And then most people follow up when it blows up as opposed to, keeping track of it and then renegotiating regularly. Hey, Bill, I've got these 4 things outstanding from you. Anything I missed on that? And do you need any help? Do we need to renegotiate any of our agreements here?
Yeah.
Now, that's the elegant human way to sort of deal with that. But boy, it's impossible to do if you don't have an external brain to be able to capture that stuff when it happens.
Yeah, that is true. And we also, we had a guy here once, Bas Kollen, he basically took a counterpoint. He said, well, that's the best way to kill motivation in people. If you start tracking and tracing their stuff and you start holding them accountable for that, so management by lists, that's a great way for people to start dodging responsibility. Is that something you recognize?
It's BS.
It's BS.
Why?
Yeah.
Why not? I mean, come on. If I'm writing down what you say you're going to do, and you're writing down what I say I'm going to do, we just moved up the food chain in terms of how important we've agreed this is. I need all the help I can get, don't you?
Yeah,
that's very true.
Yeah, come on, guys.
I think Bas actually meant like Excel management, where the company goes bad for a month and everybody goes looking at numbers and not at what people should do. And everybody's feared by numbers and.
Sure. Well, that doesn't. None of that would really make a lot of sense. I mean, you really have to take case by case and what's the situation, there and what, who did what. But, and you don't want to be micromanage anything. Most people micromanage because they don't trust people and don't trust people's systems. They don't trust their own system, and so they then go dabble in everybody else's when it looks like things are in trouble.
Yeah.
As opposed to on the front end clarifying deliverables and how we're going to check and how often do we need to check with each other. But the truth is, one of the things that happens when 2 or more get together with this, the complexity of agreements goes up exponentially.
Yeah.
See, I could be clear, Michelle, and have a clear head, and you could have a clear head, but we get together, we could very easily not have clear heads anymore if it's ambiguous what you've agreed to do and what I've agreed to do in some sort of mutual enterprise that we're engaged with. That's why it gets very, very tricky. If people aren't doing GTD, because it gets really cloudy very fast. And that's one of the reasons it's so valuable for everybody around you to get at least understand the system and catch it, because a common lexicon called what are we trying to accomplish, what's the next action, waiting for list, keeping agendas lists so that when you meet with people you move the needle on everything that you need to do that. And I mean, God, this is just advanced common sense. They're much more challenging opportunities and problems people need to be dealing with than the results of that not being done.
Yeah, there's a big benefit of people around you getting things done. I noticed that as well in my jobs. When I started getting things done, people started noticing the difference.
Yeah,
what's up here? This guy, he doesn't forget anything anymore. His quality is improving. Yeah, he's more uplifting. He's motivated more. But one thing in particular is that if we make an agreement with this guy, he will hunt you down and make sure that it happens. So the accountability factor all of a sudden arose. And that is what, in that particular setting, got my environment to start getting things done as well, because they were like, hey, there's a system here. What's the system? Well, there's this nice book, you can read it, and it's fun. However, when people start getting things done, there's this kind of, type of person that has a natural tendency to agitate against setting goals. I don't want to set goals because setting goals just, confines me way too much, and I want to be free in the moment. And there was this bit in, I think it was Making It All Work, that also talks about when to not set goals. Is that something you can?
Yeah, well, as I say, it's not, they shouldn't be setting goals. They need to be cleaning their toilet. In other words, if you can't handle today, and if you're not dealing with, the things that you need to be dealing with today, you're not going to have the energy to be able to energize a goal. And not only that, setting a goal may overwhelm you. Not only that, you may not be mature enough with a clear enough head to set the right goal.
So basically, if you're not, mature enough to clean your own house, how are you expected to run a Fortune 500 company?
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with any of that, quite frankly. There's nothing wrong with it, but it may not be the appropriate time or place to set the goal. You may need to, get another 6 months under your belt in terms of the new career that you've done or the change that you've just made before you're going to make the right goal. And there's nothing wrong with setting a goal as long as you have the freedom to change it tomorrow if you get better data.
Yeah.
So just, that's it. The whole thing is just don't get hung up on anything. It's really, really good to do what you need to do right now to get stuff off your mind. And so if setting a goal is going to get something off your mind, you need to do that. If setting a goal is going to put more on your mind,
probably
then you can handle very well and create more overwhelming guilt and frustration. Then I'm voting against it.
Yeah, I can understand that.
We're coming to an end, right? Yeah.
It's about 2 hour mark now.
Just wondering. I mean, you've made something. You created an industry, and it's fascinating to me that when when one person writes a book and it, for years, all these apps. I don't even. How many apps were there?
Over 300 last count.
Over 300. I think I tried about 30. But I mean, it's just this whole industry around getting things done. You created an economy. People are paying their bills because of your methods.
It's a movement.
It's a movement.
Yeah.
How's your experience about that? I mean, do you wake up in the morning and tell yourself like, yeah, I did it. It's an amazing thing to be creating and actually be of value for this world. I mean, it must feel like that.
Yeah. I mean, overall, I just feel blessed that I somehow had the opportunity to be able to create something. Believe me, I paid my dues in terms of how much I agonized about what to do for the first 35 years of my life.
Yeah.
So again, guys, I'm 70 right now. So, at least for the last 35 years, it's been absolutely delightful to have, a business and to be doing stuff that does nothing but improve people's conditions. Yeah. Does nothing. I mean, you implement any of this. This is not like dangerous stuff. You're not running with scissors here with this stuff. Anything you do with it is going to improve anybody's conditions in life out there. And that's just wonderful to have, to actually get paid. I would do it if I didn't get paid because I can't stop giving people this helpful advice. If you said, as a matter of fact, when I first designed the first sort of 2-day version of a seminar around the material that I was doing in the coaching, I said, if I only had 2 days with people, what would I want them to know? And basically that, to be accountable for where they have put their energy. In other words, anything you've got your attention on, you've wrapped yourself around, your karma, if you will, the stuff that you've put in motion, but you haven't completed and, that you haven't eaten yet, or been accountable for, you need to be aware of that and the power of that and getting control of that. And then you need to be aware of where you then put your energy and what you focus it on. Mm-hmm. So I said, that's why as far as I'm concerned, that's really what the whole of our planetary experience is. So I couldn't stop telling people anything about that. Mm-hmm. So what you see is, me designing the stuff and over the time finding it the ways that without having to talk at such an esoteric level with people, I can just ask you, what the hell is that piece of paper doing on your desk? And it automatically gets you into the driver's seat of your life. But otherwise it owns you. Yeah. So I found something that was just so brilliantly beautiful about that. But kind of back to your initial question about it, it kind of depends on what side of the bed I wake up in the morning. Sometimes I wake up and I go, God, only 3 billion of these books are out there. God, the planet's got 7 billion people. Wake the fuck up. Come on, let's get going. What happened? Let's go. And then the other time I wake up and I'm surprised anybody gets this.
And then we're back at the perspective thing.
Yeah.
That's cool.
It's kind of like, so I'm usually somewhere in between about all that. But it's great. I have a blessed life.
All right.
Amen to that.
Yes. So as a sort of rounding up question, let's say you've never heard of Getting Things Done before this podcast and you want to get started. And you would want to go next action on Getting Things Done. Then the first step would probably be buy the book, but obviously. But what element of Getting Things Done would you recommend people start with straight away. Because if you talk about implementation, you go past all the tools, the apps, the 300 ones. You can just start out on paper. That's, what you say about that. So I want to start getting things done today. What's the first thing I do?
Well, it's hard to move away from the blocking basic core practices. Go get it out of your head. People have asked me, how long does it take to experience the value of this? So I said, well, how long would it take you to write down the top 10 things that are on your mind and decide the next action you need to take on each one of those? And you're going to feel more in control and more focused immediately. I know I get people to spend 2 minutes and they suddenly start to taste this thing. Yeah. So you don't have to go very far to start to implement the basic stuff here. Externalize it, decide next actions on it. And then, of course, have some sort of a systematic way to keep track of those things if you can't finish them in the moment. But that it's really, in a sense, that simple.
It's real basic.
Get it out of your head, guys. And then sooner than later, get rid of the stuff that you wrote down because you've now organized the results of thinking about it into some sort of more coherent whole. But it doesn't, the book is written. There's a whole section in the book that actually walks people through the coaching process. So if you could hire me to work with you desk side, that's literally, you just follow directions in there. It'll tell you what to do. It's not a bad idea to block out, if you can, a day or 2 days if you can, because if you sort of follow directions here, it'll really get you set up. But you are going to need to capture all your stuff, clarify it, and then create some custom way to keep track of that on lists. And to your point, if you're not sure what kind of a list manager or an organization tool you need, just simply paper and pen and paper works just fine. A loose leaf notebook, they just create some list in there. Then you can always, then morph that into a digital form. But if you can't do it in pencil and paper, you're not going to be able to do it in the digital world. And everybody looks at what's the next app? What's the next app that'll get me to do it? The next app that'll get me to do it. Once you get GTD, it doesn't matter. You can make any app work.
Yeah.
You can do it in Excel. You can make lists in Word. You can use a paper planner. It doesn't matter.
It's true.
Well, paradoxical. It's like it doesn't matter, but the more you get GTD, the more you really want a really cool tool. And what's the best one to do? I understand.
I've always been walking around with this idea to create some kind of productivity planner, happiness journal kind of thing. And this podcast fired me up to just go fucking do it.
We'll probably do this.
So you just reset my brain again. Man, we're going to do it.
So basically we can, all it takes is a weekend. In 2 days' time, you can change your life for the better for a whole lot.
If you hold to it. I mean, we do a lot of one-on-one coaching still, in our company, and that's our typical coaching program is a 2-day desk side, pretty all day for 2 days, a little prelim stuff and some little follow-up on that. And usually in 2 days, you can get a pretty good system. You can kind of lay track and get the system set up. You get the content out there, get people to make next action decisions, and get at least a working tool or list manager of some sort to get going with. It's a bare start, but that is enough. We've had people just use that to then get up and going.
It's the first step towards your excellence.
Where can people find you online, social media?
Gettingthingsdone.com. Very
That's
easy to do. I'm Instagram dallen45, birth year by the way. So and Twitter GTD guy.
1.2 million followers, I noticed.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Awesome. Well, I think that kind of wraps up our first international podcast.
This was the moment, man.
This was it. This was a milestone. I hope our English wasn't too cringy.
You guys are great. Yeah. So I had fun, and
thank you.
Hopefully this was reasonably intelligible to.
This was great. I learned a lot today, and I've been using getting things done for a while now. So it's really easy how you can look past some of the basic stuff, and hearing you talk about it, I need to get back to that.
There's always another level. I've had people read Getting Things Done 10 times, and they say it's a totally different book every time they do it. I've met a number of very, very sophisticated professionals, particularly, that every time they change careers or jobs, they read the book again because you really need to recalibrate and recast because things will go a little stale in terms of what you're doing, and as you're changing, your system also needs to be dynamic and moving as well.
Yeah, it needs to adapt to the environment as well. So
True.
All right.
So go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yeah, so this is the end of the podcast. I mean, first international one. We will be getting more international guests.
Yep.
We've been in contact with a few. Jason Silva.
Yes.
Jimmy Nelson, the famous photographer. Christopher Ryan. He's an author as well. If Aubrey Marcus comes around this year to the Netherlands, probably
fun.
I'll just make him sit in that chair. Who is the owner of Onnit? And Onnit supplements are we are the distributor of Onnit in the Benelux with our company Nutrofit. Are you actually a fan of nootropics?
Don't know it.
Did it actually help? You don't use nootropics like supplements?
Well,
you've been in supplements, right?
I have been in supplements, yes.
So does it do anything for your brain?
I go on and off of supplements. I think intuitively. Sometimes I'm done with that, and then sometimes it's time to
get back on it again.
Get back on it again.
So, but you've never actively tried a nootropic because it's basically what you've probably heard of whey protein and stuff like creatine, which has a beneficial effect on your muscles. Well, there's stuff that's beneficial for your brain as well, like fish oil, for example. But there are supplements as well that are dedicated to improving brain function. You never tried one of those? Would like to try one of those?
Sure.
We'll send you a couple.
I'll send you the Alpha Brain from Onnit. It's a really great product. Just goes right into your brain, earth-grown nutrients.
Yep.
And you'll be firing up GTD like never before.
That brings me to the final bit of this. I want to give a shout out to the boys at Onnit because they're our biggest brand. We sell a lot of their products because they're great products. But the CEOs of the company, Aubrey Marcus and the other champion of Onnit, Joe Rogan. We want to give a shout out to those guys because they're the reason we're actually sitting here because they inspired us to do these podcasts. So we want to dedicate this first international podcast to these guys. To the dear international listeners, well, keep an eye on us. We've got some great, excellent English guests coming up. And to the regular Dutch fans, thanks for listening. Tot de volgende keer.
Thank you all. Thank
Ciao.
you, David.
Alsjeblieft. Tot ziens.